Hi guys, and welcome to this Wikiwijs. With your literature exam coming up, I thought it might be an idea to make a new PowerPoint where we discuss some literary terms that might help you on your exam. Therefore, the goal for this lesson is that at the end you'll have a better understanding of literary terms and you can apply these to your chosen book. So in this lesson, we will start off by talking about your exam and your exam day. And then we will discuss some literary terms. We will move on to Spark Notes and how Spark Notes can help you. And then at the end of this Wikiwijs, you will find a quiz with some questions to help you out for your exam. Okay, so for your exam, you had to choose a book. You've either chosen The Life of Pi, The Kite Runner, Color Purple, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, or Girl in Translation. Hopefully by now you've either finished your book or you're almost there. On top of that, you've also had to read the long short story, which is The Cod Glass Bowl by F. Scott Fitzgerald. We have already discussed this in class, but I will add another PowerPoint where we will discuss The Cod Glass Bowl anew. And then we have a shorter short story which will be given to you on your exam, where you will read it and you will answer about 4 questions on this shorter short story. On your exam day, you're allowed to bring your literature book and a dictionary should you need one. Okay, the first literary term that we will be discussing is the protagonist and then the antagonist. So a protagonist is another fancy way of saying main character. A story will always have a protagonist. Most of the time, a protagonist is some sort of hero. Not always though, because in some cases we do find out that a protagonist is a villain. The story circles around this person's experience. We see things from the protagonist's perspective. And then you have the antagonist. An antagonist is the opposite of the main character. So whatever a protagonist is, an antagonist is not. Normally a villain of some sort, but not always. Like I've said before, sometimes a protagonist can be a villain. So let's say if the protagonist is a villain, then the antagonist is a hero. Should the protagonist be a hero, then the antagonist is a villain. And an antagonist is the opponent of the protagonist. So the protagonist fights against the antagonist in the story. And then not every story has an antagonist, because sometimes we find out that the protagonist is fighting against a natural force or a circumstance or a societal issue. And then we will be moving on to character traits. In a story, you might come across a character who is static. A static character do not change throughout the story. It stays the same. A dynamic character changes throughout the story. They may have learned a lesson and they in turn become bad or a better person or change in some complex ways. And then you have a flat character. A flat character has 1 or 2 main traits, mostly all positive or negative. So you most likely won't come across a flat character who has a positive and a negative trait. It's either all positive or all negative. And on the contrary to this, you have a round character. A round character has many different traits, both good and bad, and they make a story so much more interesting to read. And then we have the plot. The plot, you can divide it into 5 different categories. We start off with the exposition. In the exposition, it's the beginning of the story. We find out the setting, who the characters are, and what the main conflict is. We then move on to the rising action. A main character is in crisis and the events leading up to facing the conflict begin to unfold. Story becomes somewhat complicated. And then we have the climax, which is the peak of the story, the major event, and the main character faces an enemy, a fear, or a challenge. So if the main character is facing an enemy, then the protagonist is facing the antagonist. And then we have a falling action, where the story begins to slowly slow down and works towards the end. And then you have the resolution, which is the end of the story and it resolves any remaining issues the plot may have. Okay, setting, which we've already discussed during the Cod Glass Bowl. You have three different types of setting. You have time, which is when, place, which is where, and then environmental, that can be climate, weather, social, and cultural surroundings. Like I said during our lesson of the COT class ball, should I write a story right now and I tell you the time is 2020, the place is the Netherlands or technically anywhere around the world, the environmental setting would be COVID-19 pandemic. Another term that we've already discussed in class is personification, and that's a metaphor we use to describe a scene by giving an inanimate object human attributes. A common metaphor we see in stories are the sun is smiling down on us. A sun is an inanimate object. Smiling is a human attribute. Therefore, that metaphor is an example of personification. In the COT glass bowl, we also have another example, which is the COT glass bowl starts to talk towards the end of the story. Lastly, we have themes. That is, what is the story about? Is it about love? Is it about friendship? Is it about survival, like in The Life of Pi, etc.? And you can give me some example in the book where it's clear to see that, okay, the story is about love, the story is about friendship, etc. Sparknotes.com is a site that I think all of you guys are already familiar with. All the literary terms that we've just discussed, you can find on Sparknotes under analysis. I'm not sure if every book is on there. Most of the books that you could have chosen from is on the website. I'm not sure which one is not. I think it is helpful if right before your exam, while you're studying for your literature exam, you go on SparkNotes and find the analysis of your book. It might really help you out. So we have reached the end of this PowerPoint. In this PowerPoint, we've discussed your exam day. You're allowed to bring your literature book. Make sure it is the actual book and not a PDF printed version that you've printed out. Don't bring your laptop because you're not allowed to use that. We've also discussed what a protagonist and an antagonist are. A protagonist is just a fancier way of saying main character, and then you have the antagonist, which is the complete opposite of the protagonist, and these two often fight against each other. You have your character traits. We've discussed that you can have a static character, you can have a dynamic character, you can have a flat character and a round character. We've discussed the plot, setting, time, place, and environmental, personification, and the theme. Good luck, guys!